as they go back, a lot of times we think of different ways to honor our moms on Mother's Day, correct? We think of different times and things that we can do, and some people make cards, some people make breakfasts. In our house, my kids and I love to go and buy gifts for Mom. We also make stuff, but we go buy gifts for Mom. And if you've ever shopped with a toddler, what do they like to do? They go to the toy aisle first, right? And they pick out what they want. As you can see, this was picked out. And as a parent, what do? Okay. I know you think that this is what Mom wants, but is this what you want or what Mom wants? What would Mom really want? And most kids, they take that and they go, oh, yeah. Yeah. And they go out and they get Mom a cup, or they get candles or chocolate. And they think about what Mom wants. They just need reminded. But then you have that one kid. They hold on to the gift and they look at you, and you could see the wheel spinning, and they say, Mom loves taking us to the museum where the dinosaurs are, so she would love her own dinosaur Lego set. Or Mom loves playing with me, so let's buy this so she can play with me all the time while I play with this. Now, I will tell you, I just had Justice hold that. She didn't really want to get that for Mom. She's actually a great gift giver for Mom. We had her do that because Colt wasn't there. He's the one who would have picked it. But what do we see they do? They try to distort or twist the truth here. And they try to convince me, Dad, to buy them what they want. And most of the times, us dads are good about being able to see that. But every once in a while, and I had this happen once, where they had something that they knew I wanted too, and they did a really good job of convincing me. Satan uses the same exact scheme, but he's a little more clever. Because what he tries to do is he tries to lure us into a trap where we end up doing exactly what God warns about in Isaiah 5:20. It says this, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. That they twist, and everything that's good looks bad and everything that's bad looks good. And there are so many different things that God has created to be good. Right? And I could go through a long list. I'm just going to list a few of these. But some of these are things like intimate, sacred bond and partnership of marriage, the growth, support, and love of a family, the unity and encouragement and discipleship of the church, and the freedom and peace and love and joy we get in our relationship with Christ. These are all great things, but we can see the enemy try to change our view of these relationships, try to get us to twist it and view them in a different way, to almost view them as bad. And the way he does this is by using worldly wisdom to attack our hearts, so that we will see them in a distorted view and change how we treat each of these relationships. And we see this today because how many divorces do we see around us? And how many empty marriages? How many people that are living with someone but refusing to get married because they don't think marriage is a good thing? It's all around us, that type of stuff, right? Also, how many broken and estranged families where they're not talking to each other anymore? Brothers and sisters refuse to talk. How many, and I talked to a mother about this week, that Mother's Day was hard for her because she wasn't going to get to talk to half of her kids on Mother's Day because they just won't talk to her. How many split churches, disjointed churches have happened throughout the years? How many people leave Jesus? All this is because they've all of a sudden had a distorted view. Now, I will say this. You may be sitting there going, well, I'm good. You know what? If this is what Joey's talking about today, I'm covered. I can lay down and take a nap. We're good. But I want to, before you take your nap, let me ask you this question. Have you ever been tempted or said in your head, I should? Not that you did, but you said, I should leave or quit or become less active in the church, in my family, in my marriage, in my faith, because someone said something that annoyed me. Someone's being annoying in this, and I just want to distance myself from them. Or they frustrated me, or they hurt me, or they didn't do what I wanted. It's not done my way, so I don't want to be a part of that anymore. And I will say this, maybe you overcame that, and you said, I still need to do this. But you were tempted. That distortion was planted. When this happens, we need to be careful. Because what that is that's Satan attacking your heart. Which is why Proverbs 4:23 tells us, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Everything you do, every choice you make comes out of your heart and how you view things. And if we begin to have a distorted view of these relationships, the way you treat other people is going to change. Romans got this, that when they were designing their armor to protect their heart, they realized that it was important not just to protect their heart, but their lungs and other vital organs. So they created these chest plates. And what they would do is they would block any arrow, spear, or sword from piercing into those organs. And they were made out of iron so that they would withhold. That means putting something there that's permanent and strong. So to protect our hearts, God has given us what they call the breastplate of righteousness, which means living in a right relationship with God and others. Today, we're going to be in James 3:13 through 18, looking at what this is. And looking at, as I talked before, this false wisdom from the enemy, what that is and how he uses it to distort these relationships. And then we're going to look at what wisdom God gives that puts this breastplate of righteousness over our hearts. Let's begin in James 3:13 through 16. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. We see the enemy's wisdom is rooted in selfishness. James starts by addressing this wisdom of selfishness, and he says it's earthly, unspiritual, and demonic, that nothing good comes of it. If you've been reading in the Screw Tape letters, in a few weeks, we're going to get to letter 18 as you read. And C.S. Lewis in there writes about the philosophy of hell. And he says the philosophy of hell is to convince humans that they are more important than anything else. And he says the way this looks is you want them to get to thinking like animals do. And animals, this is their instinct. In order to live, I need to kill and eat another animal. In order to survive, I need to destroy another animal so that I can live. And he quotes it this way. This means for the self or for a human, sucking or taking the will and freedom of a weaker self to make us stronger. So that to be or living means to always be in competition. That's what the distortion is. is focus on yourself. And this happens in marriages, in families, in churches, and with Jesus, when we begin to put the focus on how these different people should make me happy. Or they should do things to help make my life better. And that's where we start to slip into is we get frustrated and I'm going to speak to parents and grandparents for a second. Your kid is doing something wrong, but all they're doing is jumping in a muddy puddle. Why do we get angry in the first moment? Let's be honest with ourselves. Why do we get angry? I just gave them a bath. Now they're making my life so much harder. Now I'm going to have to clean them. I'm going to have to do this, this, and this. First off, if you didn't say don't jump in the mud puddle, did they disobey you? Does the Bible say thou shalt not jump in muddy puddles? No. Now, if they disobeyed you, you have an issue there. And that's where the approach, but if your first mindset is, now they've just made my life harder. What are we thinking through there? We're making the relationship about me. Instead of, hey, they're not listening to what I've instructed them. That's going to affect them in the long run. That's where our mind should go to. But when it becomes about me, and we see this in marriages too, right? They're not doing, they're sitting there and they're just being a lazy bum watching TV all day. That's what we think about our wives, isn't it, husbands? No. They're just sitting there not doing anything. They're just making my life so much harder. What have we made it about? Me. Now, husbands, that's not an excuse for you to sit on your butts and do nothing. But I'm going to, where's our heart at? Where do we go to when that first happens? This is starting to make it all about us. And when we start to make it about us, we begin to do things that temporarily benefit us while hurting them. Sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally, and other times spiritually. And what's very interesting is this isn't an issue that started in America, okay? These aren't things that started later when we started to get cell phones and microwaves, because I've heard from everybody that's when the whole world fell apart, is when cell phones and microwaves happened, all right? Now, this is something that's been going on even back in the early church. What's interesting is 6 of the letters of the apostles, 6 of them are solely about relational issues in the church and marriages, and then every single letter has something to do with relational instruction or guidance. This is stuff that's been going and struggling with since the beginning. Here's one from 1 Corinthians 7. Paul warns against selfishly withholding affection in marriage and doing that until you get what you want, right? I'm going to hold out until you give me what I want or say sorry, and then we'll do this. And this is what it says in verse 5. So that Satan will not tempt you, and that you is plural, both of you, because of your lack of self-control. That withholding, and I'm not just talking about physical, emotional, spiritual, withholding that until you get what you want. He says, don't withhold. Don't be selfish and try to use it as a tool to get it for you, because it's going to hurt you, but it's going to hurt them too. Ephesians 6 warns against kids dishonoring their parents and disobeying them so they can get or do what they want. It also warns against parents using their kids as tools to accomplish their goals and just lashing out at them in anger. Because if they do, it will push the kids away from Christ instead of pulling them closer. James 2 warns against selfishly choosing who we serve and fellowship within the church based on how they can help us. And what this did was it left the poor and the unpopular people on the outer circle of the church. And then in Philemon, it warns against putting our feelings as more important than our relationship with someone who has hurt us by withholding forgiveness and reconciliation and saying, I'm not giving that to you because you hurting me is more important than me holding on to this so that I can get back at you. A perfect example of this is found in Luke 15, where Jesus tells of a parable of two brothers. A lot of times we call this parable of the prodigal son, but I want to focus on the two brothers. The first son comes to his dad and he asks for his inheritance now, which in that culture was a no-no, because you worked for your father and took care of him all the way into his old age until he passed away. Then you received the inheritance and you took over from there. And actually, you would also take care of your mother. And so when he comes and says, I want the inheritance now, what he's saying is, Dad and Mom, I don't care about you. I don't care about our family. I'm not going to take care of you. I want to take care of numero uno. There we go. I want to have my fun. I don't care about you guys. Give me the money. And the dad does. And the son goes out and he parties with prostitutes and fake friends. And we know they're fake friends because as soon as the money runs out, they run out the door too. Everybody leaves him. And time gets tough. And he becomes homeless and hungry and ends up working on a pig farm where for a Jew would have been a bigger issue. For us, that's like, oh, that's kind of gross. But for a Jew to have to work and live with the pigs was a big insult. It was a low moment for them. And as he does this, he has no support, which if he had stayed with his family would have had support. That's what God had intended the family to be there for him, to be there to support him and to help him and to encourage him and get him on his feet when he's in a bad point. But because of his selfishness, he had separated himself. Now, eventually, he goes back and he's welcomed back into the family. We'll talk about that in a second. But as he's welcomed back, they're throwing a big party. And the brother who had stayed home, who had served his dad, who had done everything his dad wanted, refused to go to the party, was angry. And this is why. He said in verses 29 and 30, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. Now, there's a lot that you could go in here. I'm not going to spend all day talking about this. But as we look at this parable, it applies to a lot of our relationships. It could apply to our marriages, to our families, in our churches, but especially it applies to our relationship with Jesus and how our selfishness can pull us away and alienate us from these relationships. And how often when you're young, you go, I don't need Jesus, I don't need any of that, and you go off on your own. And you're doing life on your own until you hit rock bottom. Same thing happens in marriages and families and all of that. It alienates us from everything. It can even cause us to be bitter towards God and others. Sometimes when we become this selfish, we become the second brother, that we see grace given to people and go, how they don't deserve that. And sometimes it's not, and you go, well, I'm not like that. Well, when you've seen someone blessed, and God gives them a blessing and God's doing good things in their life, I've worked so much harder than them. Why are they being blessed and not me? We become a lot like this son. But if you're there, I want to encourage you with this part of the story. When the first son realizes his selfishness, he talks to himself. And he says, I was so much better off with my dad. Actually, my dad's servants are better off than I am. I've messed up. I need to go back to my dad and apologize. I need to go and say, I'm sorry, Dad, please take me back as a servant. I don't deserve anything else. James, back in 3:16, or back in 3, he says this: if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Don't boast about it. Don't say, I'm selfish. Look at all the stuff I've gotten for myself. But he also says, don't deny the truth. When you come to realize it, accept it, acknowledge it, and say, I'm being selfish in this. I'm being selfish in my relationships. I'm being selfish in what I want from God. And go back and say, I'm sorry. In 2 Corinthians 5:18 through 19a, we're told this: all this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation, that God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them. And this is where the Father takes the Son and holds him and says, welcome home, son. Kill the fattened calf, give him my ring. He's a part of my family. God does the same thing. When we turn back to God, he will forgive us. He begins the reconciliation process. But it's not just reconciling where God forgives us. There's also a reconciliation part on our part. And there's also, maybe we're in a good spot, but we want to protect our hearts so we don't get there. We want to protect with righteousness. And James 3:17 through 18 tells us how. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. I want you to see God's wisdom for righteousness is through seeking peace. If you're trying to protect your heart with righteousness in a world that is doing everything to convince you that you are the most important thing in the world, every commercial is about it. I watched a video this week, a guy talked about this, that in boardrooms, they are having people literally sitting and getting paid to think about, how can we make you want nothing but my stuff? How can we make you think that you are the most important person and you need just this? James says the best way to do that, to conquer all of that, is to be a peacemaker. And I want to define that word peace again. I've talked about this before, but peace isn't just no arguments. Peace means a wholeness, completely together, united relationship in yourself, wholeness in your body, not just physically, but spiritually and emotionally, wholeness between you and God, and wholeness between you, the church, you and your family, you and your wife. That is what peacemaking is all about, is bringing this wholeness. And he explains how to get there in this verse. He starts with purity. And purity comes from getting rid of sin, for repentance, right? And here's what I want to say. If you struggle with this, and maybe you know you struggle with this because division and people's drama excites you. All right? If you sit there and someone starts telling gossip and you go, let me grab the popcorn, and you sit there and it's entertaining to you, you've got this already heart of division and divisiveness. If that's how you feel about your TV shows, I like the shows where everybody fights the whole time. It just makes me feel better about myself. Not really, but that's what I've heard. We got to cut that stuff out. All right? We got to cut out TV shows, movies, books, songs that are focused on and glorify families fighting, personal drama, division, done in an unhealthy way. That's all it focuses on. Also, cut out conversations that are full of gossip. Now, I didn't say cut out conversations with gossips. If someone's a gossip, don't go to them and say, I'm never talking to you again, gossip, out of here. No, but if they start bringing up gossip, hey, no, that's not my place. I don't need to know what Aunt Cheryl's second cousin did to his wife on the third side. All right? I don't need to know all that. Let's just talk about life. Once we get there and we start to cut these things out, then you want to be peace-loving. Means you love peace, that you desire to have peace in your life. And you do this by reading and watching things that are focused on healing, that are focused on healing relationships, building unity. All right, I'm going to ask a question for the mothers. What is one of the favorite genre of books and movies for most women? What is it? Romance. All right? Why do women like the romance books and movies? They hope that if they watch it enough, that will happen in their life. That they hope that will, and here's the deal. That is, the problem is you're not getting your husband to watch it with you so that he'll want the same thing. Husbands, Mother's Day, watch one romance movie with them today. But really, what I'm getting to is when you watch that, it has you drawn to want more romance in your life, right? So I'm not talking about we should watch romance movies. What I'm trying to say is we should be watching movies, reading things, watching TV shows that promote wholeness, that promote bringing people together, and especially promote us being brought together with Christ, being brought together as the church under Christ. Also, surround yourself with people who are peacemakers, people who go out of their way to bring peace. Put those people around you. The people that are always causing division, still associate, but kind of distance yourself a little bit because they're not going to help you. You want to bring these people in that are seeking peace. Then submit to the Holy Spirit. And as He convicts you, He'll convict you to think on how your actions and words affect others. What does this do when I talk and say this? How does it encourage them or does it tear them down? Then be merciful, showing forgiveness where forgiveness is needed. Serving others and helping provide their needs. Maybe it's providing something physical. Maybe it's an act of service and going out and chopping wood or something like that. Or maybe it's giving a word of encouragement. It could be listening. It could be praying with. The list goes on and on. And as you do that, what you'll notice is the last part of this verse says to have a sincere heart, that this wisdom comes with sincerity. And as you start, it may not be sincere in the moment. That's why you need to change. But as you go through this process and let God work on you, God will work on you to where your heart is sincere, to where you desire this and you want this. And it'll become so sincere that you not only want to seek peace in your relationships, but you'll want to be a peacemaker and help others find peace and unity in their relationships. First of all, with God, and then with others. Now, I want to go back to the prodigal son story for a second to close out. Because oftentimes when we focus on the Father, we view the Father as God. And there's a reason we do that, because that's what the Father is. He is God. But I think sometimes we stop there and say, God is the one who's to forgive. God is the one who welcomes us in. God is the peacemaker. But Jesus said in Luke 6:36, be merciful as the Father is merciful. So I want you to look at this parable with me. And I want you to look at it through the eyes of the Father. As his son is returning home with his head hung low and pig poop and pig smell all over him, from a distance the father sees him and he runs to him with open arms, already forgiving him and bringing him back into the family. When we see people that have hurt us or walked away from the church or walked away from our family and they're coming back, our response shouldn't be, oh no. We should be excited. Excited that they're ready to come back, ready to turn around, arms out, ready to hug them and welcome them back in. Letting go of any hurt that's been done in the past. But also we need to be like the father, that when he notices his other son hasn't come in from the field to come in and party and celebrate, he sees there's a rift. And what does the father do? He doesn't send a servant out and say, hey, tell my son to come here. The father goes out personally, and he goes into the field where his son is. He says, what's going on? Why aren't you in this party? And the reason he does all this is given in Luke 15:32. This is what the father says. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to realize that when we are in a right relationship with God and that we're able to repair our relationship with others, leading them to repair their relationship with Christ, then first of all, we were dead and we are alive. But also we need to realize that when people aren't in a right relationship with God, then they're not in a right relationship with his church. If they're not in a right relationship with God, they're dead. If they're not in a right relationship with the church, they're walking towards death. Do you want anyone to die? There's silence. I was hoping for a no. None of us want anyone to die, right? We don't want people to die, so we want them to be alive. That's why we need to go out and work on reconciling. And when we reconcile between us and them, guess what happens? They go, oh, why do you love me so much? Why do you care? Why are you accepting me back? Because the Father did the same thing for me. And that points them to that, and they go, okay, well, I want that. And as they do that, here's the next part they do. You get to be a part of someone who was lost being found. You get to be a part of someone who was dead being risen. That is the best thing in the world. And I want you to reflect on a verse that I'm going to read here in a second. And I want you to decide if you're going to respond to the call that God's giving you. In 2 Corinthians 5:19 through 21. And he's committed to us the message of reconciliation. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors. As though God were making his appeal through us, we implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. If you are a Christian, are you going to accept that challenge? That call to be